Hello class, a very warm welcome to my online lecture video. Before we begin, let me give you a very brief introduction about myself. My name is Sayandip. I am an associate professor in the Department of Film Studies in Chandigarh University. I am an alumni of both Jadavpur University, where I did my masters in film studies, and then to SRFTI, Satyajit Ray Film and Television Institute, where I did my post-graduation diploma in film editing. Now, let's come back to the class. Let's talk about what we understand as time in film. Now, as you know, time is not entirely is shown in film as we know in our real life. Time is manipulated. Time is an event which we sculpted around. If I take words from the famous filmmaker Andrei Tarkovsky, that we sculpt in time. Now, as we can tell, that there are generally uh, two or three kinds of time manipulation happens in film. And by the way, this manipulation of time is entirely the responsibility of the film editor, who manipulates with this time to fit into the storyline or the narrative and serve to us. Now, what are these manipulation of times, or what are these different kinds of time what we see in film? The first one is real time. What is real time? Real time is when a sequence or is presented, when a sequence or a cluster of sequences are presented exactly as it occurs, that we do not tamper with them, meaning that without any prior edit or jump in time. There is a television series, a very hit television series, which is called 24. It was later remade in Hindi as well. Anyway, 24, a very popular Hollywood television series, a crime series. As its name suggests, it happened within a particular time frame of 24 hours. So there is always a clock which shows you that how much time is spent on what particular event, and everything goes by that time. So an entire event of 1 hour is depicted within 24 hours of storyline. Or when we do not disturb the time, when we do not manipulate the time, like the films like Sleep or Empire State Building of Andy Warhol. Andy Warhol was an intellectual, he was a poet, he was a filmmaker, he was a critic, he was a musician as well, and he was a painter and artist as well. What did he do? In order to not to disturb the natural organic flow of the time, what Warhol did, he just placed his camera as it is and pressed capture. He didn't disturb it. He shot a man slept for straight, say, 7 to 8 hours and named the film Sleep, where he shot the entire thing as it happens, which is in this case how a man sleeps. Or in another film, which is called Empire State Building, that in New York, in front of the famous Empire State Building, he just placed his camera on the opposite of Empire State Building. And he shot a one whole day of events unfolding in front of the Empire State Building without disturbing the natural time movement. He did not manipulate the time. Now that is one kind of time what we show, what we see in film, what we show in films. What is the another time? That is the real time. How we manipulate the real time. Now when we see a film may happen for say 1 hour, or the actual events which are happening. When we say a film happen, we are meaning that the actual events, the narration, the progression of the story that is happening. So this progression of the story may be of 1 hour, or maybe 1 year, or maybe 1 decade. We never know. Like the same thing happened in director Steve McQueen's film 12 Years a Slave. It depicts a story of a man who was a free man, and then he was became a slave. He became a slave for 12 long years, and then later he was liberated and rejoined with his family. Now it's almost some 12 to 14 years of a long history from a man's life. So in order to show this film, in order to shoot this film, do we really go for a 12 long years of film? That is not possible. So what did we do? We manipulated the time, we condensed that 12 years or 14 years or this long stretch time into our real time, that is the running length of the film of say 2 hours to 3 hours. We manipulate with the time. Here, the filmic time has to do with the manipulation and progression of an elapsed order of events, which are both visual and oral in that given time frame. Filmic space is concerned with the agreement of those selected visual and oral elements, which makes the whole narration of the story. There is one more film, say the very famous German film of Tom Tykwer, Run Lola Run. Now, in exactly Run Lola Run's story was of 22 minutes. The 22-minute story is that our one main protagonist, Manny, he was supposed to rob a supermarket in order to pay off some debt, and his girlfriend Lola wants to stop her. That whole time frame is 22 minutes. If she cannot stop him within 22 minutes, then Manny will rob that place and eventually will die because there are police there. So then what Lola did, and with the backstory of flashback and then what Lola's thinking of the flash forward, which is essentially jumping in and out of the selected time frame, the whole film, that is the real time, consists of say around 2 hours. But the real time which is we are showing in the film, that is of the 22 minutes. This is the difference between how we manipulate, how we stretch that 22 minutes into our 2 hours of the filmic experience time or the real time. How the real time is manipulated within the real time. There is one more kind of a time we usually see in the film, that is parallel time, or as in edit terms, what we can say is parallel editing or cross-cut editing. What is that? Now, in this, things happen in different spaces, but in one particular time. That is, something happening in here, in this time, and at the same time, in another space, something else is also happening, which may be connected to this or which may not be connected to this. If they are connected, then that will lead to a different story. If they are not connected, that will also different story. Maybe in later we'll come to know about that how they can be connected and the story moves on to its own direction. A very famous example from Francis Ford Coppola's Godfather 1. That is, we all remember the baptism in blood sequence, where Michael Corleone's son was getting baptized, and at the same time, the baptism was happening in the church, and at the same time, in few locations, at the same time, his people were killing or murdering one after another his opponents. It was all happening at the same given time, but at the different spaces and culminating towards one particular goal or a narrative structure of the film. Incidentally, we must say that this uses of cross-cutting or manipulating different spaces in one time first happened in the American film of the story of the American firefighter. In that film in 1905, where we showed that how a building is collapsed under fire, and at the same time how the firemen, the firefighters, they are rushing towards the scene, where one scene is again the firefighters are going upwards, and another scene is where the family or the people are trapped inside a room, and these all are happening at the same time. This was the first film which shows a very vast possibility of filmmaking and how edit can change and give filmmaking a separate meaning altogether, where it condensed the time into one